The humid air was thick, heavy, clinging to my skin like a second layer. It was a familiar embrace, the breath of the Amazon, one I'd woken up to for the last 7 years. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne, and my world used to be a symphony of rustling leaves, chirping insects, and the distant, territorial calls of howler monkeys. I was a primatologist, deep in the Peruvian Amazon, studying the intricate social structures of the capuchin monkeys, their intelligence, their uncanny human-like behaviors. This morning, however, the jungle was silent. A chilling, unnatural hush had fallen, broken only by the frantic buzz of flies around something unseen, something rotting. My watch read 0617. The sun, a molten disk, was just beginning to burn through the canopy, painting the underside of the leaves in sickly greens and yellows. I stood on the rickety platform of my treehouse lab, binoculars pressed to my eyes, scanning the familiar path below. My research assistant, Elena, should have been back by now. She'd left before dawn, tracking a new troop of white-faced capuchins we'd been observing, promising to return by 06 for our morning data sync. Elena was meticulous, punctual to a fault. Her absence, coupled with the profound silence, twisted a knot in my stomach. What could have happened? A flash of movement in the dense undergrowth caught my eye. Not the fluid, graceful swing of a capuchin, nor the lumbering gait of a tapir. This was different, jerky, unnatural. I adjusted the focus. Through the leaves, a shape resolved itself. It was a capuchin, small, its fur matted and dark, but something was terribly wrong with its posture. It moved in a series of staccato spasms, its head lolling to one side, mouth agape. A low, guttural growl, nothing like the usual capuchin chatter, ripped through the air. My blood ran cold. I lowered the binoculars, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't right. Animal behavior was my life. I knew these creatures. This was not normal. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by a wet, tearing sound. My gaze darted to the spot. A flash of red. My stomach lurched. Was it feeding? I grabbed my machete, a heavy, well-worn tool that felt suddenly inadequate, and my satellite phone. No signal, of course. The jungle always played havoc with comms. I tried Elena's radio frequency. Nothing but static. My throat tightened. Elena. The capuchin appeared again, closer, emerging from a curtain of ferns. It was undeniably one of our study subjects, identifiable by a faded red tag on its ankle. Number 117. Whisper, we called him, for his timid nature. But this was no longer Whisper. Its eyes were milky white, completely devoid of their usual intelligent sparkle. Its fur was caked with mud and something else, something dark and vicious. Its jaw hung unnaturally wide, exposing teeth stained crimson. A foul odor, a mix of decay and something metallic, wafted up to my platform. It wasn't looking at me, but down, at something on the ground. It was tearing at it, a sound I now recognized as ripping flesh and crunching bone. What was it eating? My mind reeled. Capuchins were omnivores, but they were not scavengers of this kind. They certainly didn't exhibit this kind of frenzied, violent feeding. Another movement, barely a rustle. 3 more capuchins, equally disheveled, equally wrong, emerged from the brush. They weren't fighting over the kill. They simply joined Whisper, a silent, ravenous communion of flesh. The sight was horrific, a primal tableau of savagery. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the machete. When jungle animals changed, I had always imagined a gradual shift, perhaps disease, perhaps an environmental toxin. Not this sudden, brutal transformation into something so utterly alien. I needed to see what they were feeding on. The morbid curiosity, the scientific imperative, battled with the sheer terror coiling in my gut. I crept to the edge of the platform, slowly, quietly. Below, partially obscured by the feasting animals, lay a backpack. Elena's backpack. and beside it, a torn piece of her bright orange rain jacket. A wave of nausea washed over me. Elena! My vision blurred. She was down there, or what was left of her. My research assistant, my friend, reduced to a meal for these things. The thought was unbearable. I choked back a sob, clamping a hand over my mouth. The sheer brutality of it, the unexpectedness. 1 minute, the world was normal, full of data and observations. The next, it was a horror show. The changed animals, their bodies jerking, their movements punctuated by those wet, tearing sounds, continued their gruesome meal. The stench grew stronger. I felt lightheaded, dizzy with shock and grief and an overwhelming animalistic fear. What had happened? How could this be? My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A new virus? A parasitic infection? But the speed, the aggression, the complete loss of self, it defied everything I knew. I had to get out of here. Not just for my safety, but to report this, to warn someone. But who? My base camp was days away, through dense jungle. The nearest village was a small collection of huts, hours by dugout canoe downriver. I was completely isolated. The true horror of my situation began to dawn on me. One of the changed capuchins, perhaps sensing my presence, perhaps just randomly, lifted its head, its milky eyes fixed on my platform. It let out a high-pitched shriek, a sound of pure malevolence that made every hair on my body stand on end. The other capuchins immediately looked up, their bloody faces turning towards me. Their growls intensified, a chorus of guttural hunger. They were coming for me. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I scrambled back from the edge, fumbling for the ladder leading up to the second, higher platform where my emergency supplies were stored. The metal rungs felt slick with sweat. I could hear them below, scratching, chittering, their movements faster now, more agitated. They were attempting to climb the supporting poles of the treehouse. Their claws scraped against the rough bark. I could hear the thuds as they jumped, trying to reach. I reached the upper platform, a small enclosed space designed for emergency weather. Inside, a well-stocked supply of dried food, water filters, medical kit, a charged satellite phone for absolute emergencies, and my tranquilizer rifle. I grabbed the rifle, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was a dart gun, not designed for lethal force, but I had a few lethal rounds meant for dangerous predators tucked away. I loaded one, a heavy, armor-piercing round designed to take down a jaguar. The satellite phone, I powered it on. The screen flickered to life, showing searching for signal. Nothing, no bars. My stomach dropped. This was worse than I thought. If the emergency satellite phone, designed for global coverage, couldn't find a signal, then something truly catastrophic had occurred. It wasn't just my local comms. The grid was down. A sudden sharp crack from below. One of the supporting beams of the treehouse groaned. They were tearing at the structure itself. The capuchins, they weren't just changed, they were stronger, more destructive. When jungle animals changed, they seemed to gain an unnatural resilience, a relentless drive. I peered through a narrow slit in the platform's wall. Below, the scene was pure pandemonium. Dozens of capuchins now, not just the original 4, swarmed the base of the tree. They ripped at the support ropes, gnawed at the wooden beams, their milky eyes fixed on my sanctuary. The combined growls and chittering were a cacophony of primal hunger. They were determined. This treehouse wouldn't hold, not against this many, and not against whatever new strength they possessed. I had to move. I had to get out. But where? The jungle was my home, my laboratory, my life. Now it was a death trap. I looked at my map, a detailed topographical survey of the region. My nearest hope was the small river outpost, Rio Azul, about 30 kilometers downriver. It had a small medical clinic, a communication station, and enough supplies to get me further, if it was still standing. If it hadn't been swallowed by this same madness, my escape route, a zip line, a desperate last resort, connected my upper platform to a sturdy sila tree about 100 meters away, across a small ravine. From there, I could descend and follow a hidden game trail that led to the river. It was risky. The zip line was old, designed for equipment, not a panicked human. I could hear the tearing below, getting closer. The entire platform swayed precariously. I had no choice. I secured my medical kit, a small bag of dried food, water filters, and the tranquilizer rifle to my back. I grabbed a coil of climbing rope. Every movement felt clumsy, heavy, my hands numb with fear. As I prepared the zipline harness, another sound reached me, faint at first, then growing louder. A high-pitched shriek, followed by the crashing of branches. Not capuchins. Too large, too powerful. My blood ran colder still. Jaguars. Pumas. What if the larger predators had also changed? My mind flashed back to the video title, When Jungle Animals Changed. It wasn't just monkeys, it was everything. The thought paralyzed me for a second. If the apex predators had turned, the jungle was no longer just dangerous, it was impossible. Civilization crumbled rapidly indeed, but what of the wild, untamed world? It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a retreat from human madness. Now it was the source. The shrieks and crashes grew closer. Whatever it was large and moving fast. The capuchins below my treehouse scattered, their chittering turning to panicked squeals. They were running, not from me, but from something else, something bigger, something that even these changed, fearless monkeys feared. I peered through the slit again. The ground below was now empty of capuchins. Only the mangled remains of Elena and her backpack were left, surrounded by fresh blood. Then, a massive shadow detached itself from the gloom of the undergrowth. A jaguar. Its fur, usually a magnificent tapestry of rosettes, was matted and stiff. Its eyes, those piercing, intelligent golden eyes, were now clouded, milky white, identical to the capuchins. Its jaw was slack, dripping saliva, and a low, guttural roar ripped from its throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and hunger. It was bigger than any jaguar I'd ever seen, its muscles bulging, its movements unnaturally swift. It pounced on Elena's remains, tearing at them with incredible ferocity, not feeding so much as obliterating. My stomach churned. This was a nightmare given form. When jungle animals changed, they became instruments of pure, unthinking destruction. I strapped myself into the zipline harness, my hands fumbling with the clips. The platform groaned again, a deep, ominous sound of cracking wood. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my feet. The jaguar below, finished with its desecration, lifted its head. It sniffed the air, then its milky gaze fixed directly on me. It let out another roar, a challenge, a promise of violence. Then it launched itself at the tree, claws tearing into the bark, beginning to climb. It was impossibly fast. I pushed off the platform, sending myself hurtling across the ravine, the zip line groaning under my weight. The air rushed past me, a brief moment of terrifying freedom. Behind me, I could hear the furious roars of the jaguar as it clawed its way up the tree. The zipline cable sang under the strain. I prayed it would hold. I prayed I would make it. I hit the ceiba tree with a jarring thud, my shoulders screaming in protest. The impact rattled my teeth. I immediately began to unclip, my fingers working frantically. Below, I could hear the jaguar crashing through the branches of my now collapsing treehouse, its enraged roars echoing through the jungle. It would be here in seconds. I rappelled down the sturdy trunk of the ceiba, hand over hand, ignoring the burning in my palms. The ground was still 100 feet below. Every second counted. I glanced up. The jaguar was already on the zip line, its massive body straining the cable, its milky eyes fixed on me. It was following. It was hunting me. I dropped the last 20 feet, landing hard on the forest floor, my knees buckling. Pain shot up my legs, but I ignored it. I fumbled for my compass. The river, east.
I plunged into the dense undergrowth, not bothering with the game trail. I just needed to put distance between myself and that thing. The jungle became a blur of green and shadow. I pushed through thick vines, over gnarled roots, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth, decay, and the metallic tang that now seemed to permeate everything. I could hear the jaguar crashing through the canopy above, paralleling my frantic flight. It was tracking me by sound, by scent. My mind raced. How could this be happening? One day I was documenting primate behavior. The next, I was prey in my own sanctuary. When jungle animals changed, they became something far more terrifying than any natural predator. They became relentless, unrelenting. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs felt like lead. The sounds of the jaguar seemed to be receding slightly. Maybe I was gaining ground. Maybe it had lost my scent. Hope, a fragile, desperate thing, flickered in my chest. Then a new sound, a low, continuous snarl, just ahead, and another, and another. I skidded to a halt, hiding behind a massive strangler fig. Peering through the roots, I saw them. A pack of wild dogs, maybe 6 of them, their fur bristling, their teeth bared. And they were different. Their eyes, like the capuchins and the jaguar, were milky white. Their movements were unnatural, a twitching, lurching gait. They were tearing at something, a fresh kill, something large and brown, a tapir. I was trapped between 2 horrors. The changed jaguar behind me and this pack of changed dogs in front. The jungle, once a place of wonder and discovery, was now a labyrinth of terror, every shadow a potential predator. I couldn't go back. I couldn't go forward. I was pinned. My gaze fell upon the tranquilizer rifle in my hand. It only had 3 lethal rounds left. 3 shots against a world gone mad. Not enough, nowhere near enough. But it was all I had. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. My scientific mind, trained to observe and analyze, tried to assert itself over the primal panic. These animals were driven by something new, not just hunger, but a ravenous, destructive urge. I had to be smart. I had to use the jungle against itself. The scent of the tapir was strong, drawing flies, drawing predators. But it could also be a distraction. I needed to move and move quickly. A branch snapped behind me. The jaguar. It was closer than I thought. The wild dogs, alerted by the sound, turned their milky eyes toward the newcomer. A low growl rumbled through the pack. The jaguar emerged from the trees, a terrifying, silent hunter. It saw the dogs, saw their kill. For a moment, they stared at each other, 2 apex predators, both changed, both wrong. Then, the jaguar let out a piercing roar and lunged. Not at me, but at the dogs. The pack responded with a flurry of snarls and snapping jaws. This was not a normal territorial dispute. This was a chaotic, frenzied brawl. They were tearing at each other with unholy savagery, seemingly oblivious to their own injuries. A dog went down, its leg ripped off. The jaguar took a gash to its side. But they kept fighting, kept biting, kept tearing. This was my chance. I moved silently, carefully, staying low, skirting the edge of the brutal fight. Every step was deliberate, placing my weight softly, avoiding snapping twigs. The sounds of the battle masked my movement. I moved past the fighting animals, past the remains of the tapir, deeper into the jungle. I could still hear the roars and snarls, growing fainter as I put more distance between myself and the carnage. The sun was higher now, filtering through the canopy and fragmented beams, illuminating dust motes dancing in the humid air. I stumbled upon a small, overgrown path. A game trail, but one that looked like it had been used by something larger than an animal. Footprints. Human footprints. Faded, but undeniable. Someone had been this way, perhaps still was.
A glimmer of hope. Other people. Survivors. Maybe they knew what was happening. Maybe they had answers. Maybe they had a way out. I followed the trail, my pace quickening, spurred by the faint scent of charcoal and wood smoke. Civilization hadn't completely crumbled, not yet. The trail led to a small clearing. In the center, a crude lean-to shelter, fashioned from palm fronds and branches. A small, smoldering fire. And a body. My breath hitched. It was a man, an indigenous local, dressed in simple cloth. His skin was gray, his eyes milky white, identical to the changed animals. His mouth was open, frozen in a silent scream. A deep gash, crusted with dark blood, marred his neck. Not a bite, a stab wound. He wasn't moving, not like the others. He was still, dead. But was he truly dead, or just waiting? I approached cautiously, my rifle raised, my finger hovering over the trigger. My stomach churned with a mixture of fear and dread. Was this what happened to humans? Did they also change? I circled the body slowly. No movement, no twitch. He was still. I knelt, examining the wound. It was clearly from a sharp blade, not a bite. Someone had killed him, someone human, and they had done it decisively. Why? Because he had changed, or because he was about to? The air around him hummed with a different kind of silence, a silence that spoke of recent activity, of abrupt departure. There was a small, well-worn satchel next to his hand. I reached for it, my heart pounding. What if it was a trap? What if he wasn't as dead as he appeared? My fingers brushed the worn leather. It felt warm, as if recently held. Inside, a few dried fruits, a small hunting knife, and a crude hand-drawn map. My eyes scanned the map. It showed the river, Rio Azul marked clearly, and, further down, another larger settlement, Santa Helena. And, scrawled in charcoal, an arrow pointing away from the river, deep into a remote section of the jungle, with a single word, sanctuary. Sanctuary. The word resonated with a desperate hope. A place of safety, a place where normal rules might still apply. But it was far, deep in territory I had rarely explored. And why would he be going there if he was already dead? Or was he trying to get there after he had been bitten, to find some cure, some release? I pocketed the map, the feel of the paper a small comfort. It was a lead, a direction, something to aim for in this chaotic, unraveling world. I looked at the man again. He had suffered. I couldn't leave him like this. I found a shovel near the lean-to, and, with heavy heart, I dug a shallow grave. It was a small act of humanity in a world that seemed to be losing it rapidly. As I covered his body with earth, I thought about the words from the emergency broadcast, fragments I'd heard before the silence. Quarantine yourself immediately. Symptoms present within. How long had he been like this? Had he known he was changing? Had he begged for the blade that ended his terror? The sun began its slow descent, painting the jungle in hues of orange and purple. The shadows lengthened, growing hungry. I knew I couldn't stay here. The smell of the decaying tapir, the fresh earth of the grave, the lingering scent of something deeply wrong in the air. It was a beacon for whatever lurked in the darkness. I made my way back to the game trail, moving with renewed purpose. Rio Azul was still my immediate goal. It was closer, and if the man was headed for a sanctuary, maybe others were too. Maybe there were still people there, waiting, fighting, surviving. The trail was clearer now, less overgrown, indicating more recent use. As dusk deepened, the jungle came alive with a new kind of sound. Not the familiar nocturnal chorus of insects and frogs, but a subtle, shifting rustle in the undergrowth. A distant growl that seemed to vibrate through the earth. An almost imperceptible snapping of twigs that suggested movement, purpose. When jungle animals changed, they became more active at night, driven by an insatiable hunger that defied their natural circadian rhythms. I gripped my tranquilizer rifle, the heavy, lethal rounds a cold comfort in my hands. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I moved as quietly as possible, my senses on high alert, listening, sniffing the air for that foul odor. Ahead, a faint glow. Fire. My heart leapt. Rio Azul, or at least signs of human activity. But was it a welcoming fire or a warning? In this new world, fire could mean safety, or it could mean something far more sinister. As I drew closer, the glow became brighter, revealing structures. Small wooden huts, typical of the river settlements. But they were dark, eerily silent, devoid of the usual sounds of life. No laughter, no children's voices, no radios playing music. Only the crackle of a large bonfire in the center of the village square. Around the bonfire, figures moved, humans. My relief was palpable, a physical wave of release. But as I watched, hidden in the dense foliage at the edge of the clearing, something felt off. Their movements were slow, jerky. They shuffled rather than walked. Their heads lolled. My heart sank. They weren't survivors. They were changed. One of them turned, its face catching the flickering light of the bonfire. It was a woman I recognized, Maria, who ran the small general store. Her face was gray, her eyes milky. Her jaw was slack, moving in a slow, masticating motion. She was holding something in her hands, a child's doll. And she was tearing at it, not with anger, but with a vacant, relentless focus.
They were all like that, dozens of them, shuffling around the bonfire, oblivious to each other, to their surroundings. Some were gnawing on raw meat, identifiable as deer from the antlers still attached to a partially eaten carcass. Others just stood, swaying, moaning. The fire crackled, casting long dancing shadows, turning their vacant forms into grotesque puppets. This was Rio Azul. This was where civilization crumbled rapidly. Not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing whimper of turning flesh and empty eyes. My sanctuary, my first hope, was another graveyard. I backed away slowly, silently, trying not to disturb the macabre scene. The stench of decay was overpowering now, mixed with the acrid smell of burning wood, and something else, something sweet and sickly that made my throat burn. My eyes scanned the perimeter. No normal animals, nothing alive and aware. Just the changed humans, and the occasional glimpse of a changed capuchin or a wild dog wandering through the ruined village, equally lost in the madness. I needed to cross the river. Rio Azul was built on the west bank. My only way out was to get to the east, to the uncharted territory that the dead man's map called Sanctuary. There was a small dock and usually a few dugout canoes. But would they be there? And could I get to them without being seen? I crept along the edge of the village, staying deep in the shadows, my rifle at the ready. The moans of the changed grew louder as I approached the riverbank. They were drawn to the water, perhaps for the lingering scent of life, perhaps by some instinct even they didn't understand. The dock was visible through the gloom. 2 canoes. One was overturned, splintered. The other, a smaller one, still upright, tied to a rotting wooden post. It was my only way. But getting to it meant crossing an open stretch of ground, directly in front of a cluster of changed. My hands were sweating so much the rifle stock felt slick. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. This was it. A sprint, a desperate gamble. I chose my moment. The closest changed was facing away, shuffling toward the river's edge. The others were scattered, their attention on the bonfire. I ran. My feet barely touched the ground. I moved faster than I thought possible, a surge of pure adrenaline propelling me forward. I reached the canoe, fumbling for the knot. It was old, swollen with damp, impossible to undo quickly. Damn it! A low growl. Too close. I looked up. One of the changed, a large man, his face a roadmap of scars, had turned. Its milky eyes fixed on me. It let out a guttural roar and lunged. I didn't think. I raised the rifle and fired. The heavy dart hit him square in the chest. He stumbled, but kept coming. The lethal rounds were not tranquilizers.
They were meant to kill. But this thing, this changed human, it was still moving. I fired again, aiming for the head this time. The shot connected with a sickening thud. His head snapped back, a geyser of black fluid erupting from the wound. He dropped. His body twitched once, then went still. But the sound of the rifle shot, amplified by the night, had drawn attention. More moans, dozens of them. They were turning, shuffling toward the dock, their dead eyes fixed on me. I dropped the rifle, grabbed my machete, and frantically hacked at the rope. The blade bit into the old fibers. One strand, then two. It was giving way. A group of them reached the edge of the dock, their hands grasping, their moans a horrifying chorus. One of them, a woman with long braided hair, lunged, her fingers brushing my arm. I pulled back, feeling the cold brush of her dead skin. The rope snapped. I shoved a canoe into the water with a desperate push. It bobbed, unstable, threatening to overturn. I scrambled in, grabbing a paddle. The current was swift, pulling me away from the dock, away from the grasping hands. They stood at the edge, a silent, ravenous throng, watching me go. Their moans slowly faded into the night as the current carried me downstream. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The images of Rio Azul, of Maria with the doll, of the dead man's eyes were burned into my mind. I paddled with furious energy, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the nightmare I had just escaped. The river was dark, reflecting the orange glow of the distant bonfire, a constant reminder of what I had left behind. The air grew colder as the night deepened, and the jungle pressed in from both sides, a looming, silent wall of ancient trees. I was alone, truly, utterly alone. The jungle, once a comforting presence, was now a vast, indifferent tomb. When jungle animals changed, they took the first steps in dismantling humanity's fragile hold on this planet. Civilization crumbled rapidly, and I had a front-row seat to the natural world's horrific transformation. As the hours passed, the moon rose, a sliver of white light cutting through the canopy. The river became a path of silver and shadow. I kept paddling, driven by a primal need for survival, by the terrifying silence of the altered world. The dead man's map, its word sanctuary, glowing in my mind, was my only guide. I found a small, secluded inlet as dawn approached, hidden by a curtain of hanging vines. I pulled the canoe ashore, dragging it deep into the shadows, out of sight. I collapsed, utterly exhausted, my muscles screaming in protest, my mind a whirl of horrific images. Elena, Whisper, the jaguar, Maria, the dead man, all of them victims of a nightmare that had no name. I hadn't slept in over 24 hours. My body ached, my head throbbed. I needed rest, but fear gnawed at me. What if something came for me in the dark? What if the changed animals, those relentless hunters, found me? I opened my medical kit. A few bandages, some antiseptic, a bottle of pain relievers. Not much. My supplies were dwindling fast. I had water filters, but food was becoming an issue. The dried fruits in the dead man's satchel were a welcome find. They sustained me as I thought, as I planned. I looked at the map again, spread out on a flat rock. Sanctuary. It was deep in the primary forest, far from any established human settlements. A place of such isolation that perhaps, just perhaps, it had been spared the blight. It would be a journey of days, perhaps even weeks, through some of the densest, most unforgiving terrain in the world, and I would have to do it alone. The sun rose, burning away the mist, revealing a jungle that seemed both breathtakingly beautiful and utterly deadly. The sounds were still muted, still wrong. The usual cacophony of life was gone, replaced by an unsettling quiet, punctuated by the occasional guttural growl or frantic rustle.
My first task, re-establish communications. The satellite phone. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I climbed the tallest tree I could find, a massive kapok, its buttress roots like the walls of a cathedral. From its highest branches, I might get a clearer signal. The climb was arduous, dangerous. My body was still screaming from the previous day's exertions. But I pushed through, driven by that desperate sliver of hope. At the very top, swaying precariously in the humid breeze, I pulled out the phone. Searching for signal. The screen blinked. And then, a single bar. Faint, flickering, but a signal. My heart leaped. I immediately dialed the emergency contact number for my research organization, a remote station in Iquitos, hundreds of kilometers away. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, a click. Hello? A woman's voice, raspy, strained. This is Delta 2. Identify yourself. This is Dr. Eris Thorne, I gasped, my voice raw with emotion. I'm at my field lab, or what's left of it. I'm reporting a catastrophic outbreak. The animals have changed. Capuchins, jaguars, wild dogs, they're infected, violent, cannibalistic. And humans are turning too. I saw Rio Azu. It's gone. What's happening? What is this? Silence on the other end. A long, agonizing pause. Then, the woman's voice, tight with controlled emotion. Dr. Thorne, we've been trying to reach you. We thought you were gone. The outbreak, it's global. It started in the Congo, spread like wildfire. A prion modifies neural pathways, turns organic matter into sustenance, affects all mammals.
When jungle animals changed, the virus found its perfect vector. Their close contact, their rapid reproduction, their sheer numbers. Civilization crumbled rapidly, Dr. Thorne, faster than anyone predicted. My blood ran cold. Global, all mammals, a prion. My scientific mind supplied the terrifying implications. Incurable, spreading through consumption of infected tissue. That explained the cannibalism. That explained everything. Iquitos? I managed. Is it safe? Is anyone left? Another pause. Iquitos fell 3 days ago. We're the last outpost, a small group, military, scientists, but we're surrounded. We're making a last stand. We activated the emergency beacon. Any survivors head for the high ground, the Andes. There's a contingency bunker deep in the mountains, code name Elysium. We don't know if it's active, don't know if anyone will make it. The signal flickered. Dr. Thorne, listen carefully. There are no more rescue missions. There is no help. You are on your own. Destroy your data. Destroy anything that can be consumed or repurposed by the changed. And run for your life. A burst of static. The line went dead. The single bar vanished. The screen reverted to searching for signal. Elysium, the Andes, a flicker of possibility, a desperate destination. It was thousands of kilometers away, across mountains, across hostile territory. An impossible journey. But what was the alternative? Stay in the jungle, waiting to be consumed? The dead man's map had shown sanctuary in the jungle, but now I knew that might be a trap, a temporary illusion. Elysium was my only hope now. I descended the kapok tree, my mind reeling. The scale of the disaster was incomprehensible. My world, my ordered scientific world, had been utterly destroyed. Not by war, not by natural disaster, but by a biological nightmare that turned the very fabric of life against itself. When jungle animals changed, they didn't just become monsters, they became the architects of humanity's downfall. My new mission was clear: reach Elysium, or die trying. I spent the next hour preparing. I packed my small bag with what precious few supplies I had. Water filters, dried fruit, medical kit, my machete. The tranquilizer rifle, now a deadly weapon, slung across my back. I filled my water bottles from a clear stream, adding purification tablets, a small comfort in this contaminated world. I looked at the canoe. It wouldn't do for the long overland journey to the mountains. I would have to abandon it. A pang of regret. It had been my escape from Rio Azul. Now it was just another relic of a dead world. I consulted the dead man's map again.
His sanctuary in the jungle was in the general direction of the Andes, a detour, but perhaps a safer path than sticking to the river, which would likely be teeming with changed animals and humans. The direct route was too dangerous, too exposed. I needed to move through the deepest, most untouched parts of the jungle, hoping they might be less saturated with the infected. My new journey began. I moved eastward, deeper into the untouched wilderness. The jungle here was even denser, the canopy so thick that the ground was in perpetual twilight. Every step was a struggle, pushing through tangles of vines, hacking at thick undergrowth with my machete. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and rotten vegetation, but also that other smell, the foul metallic tang of death that had become the signature of this new world. The days blurred into a monotonous rhythm of survival. Walk, cut, listen, watch. Eat the few dried fruits I had, rationing them carefully. Filter water from streams, always wary, always checking for signs of contamination. The constant mental and physical strain was exhausting. Sleep was fitful, filled with nightmares of milky eyes and snapping jaws. I chose high ground when I could, finding sturdy trees to sleep in, tying myself to branches to prevent falling. I encountered changed animals almost daily. A family of howler monkeys, their powerful roars now replaced by guttural gurgles, their eyes vacant. I watched from a distance as they tore apart a nesting bird, not for food, but with a mindless, destructive fury. A tapir, its skin covered in festering sores, lurching through the undergrowth, crashing into trees, oblivious to its own injuries. It didn't react to me, just kept moving, a ghost of its former self. I learned to recognize the subtle cues, the unnatural silence, followed by the frantic buzzing of flies, the particular stench, the jerky, uncoordinated movements, the lack of fear. When jungle animals changed, they became single-minded engines of destruction, driven by a primal, insatiable hunger, no longer wary of humans or each other. This was a critical lesson. They were not intelligent, they were instinctual, predictable in their unpredictability. My 3 lethal rounds for the tranquilizer rifle were still unused. I had learned to avoid confrontation, to move silently, to melt into the shadows. My machete was my primary tool, not for fighting, but for clearing a path. Survival in this new jungle meant becoming as much a part of it as the creatures themselves, but never forgetting the difference. I was still human. I still felt. I still feared. One afternoon, a week into my journey, I stumbled upon a small clearing. In its center, a makeshift altar, adorned with colorful feathers and small carved wooden figures.
And a man, kneeling before it, chanting in a low, rhythmic tone. He was an elder, his face lined with wisdom, his body frail but dignified. He was the first unchanged human I had seen in days. My heart pounded with conflicting emotions, relief, hope, but also suspicion. What if he was a survivor who had lost his mind? What if he was dangerous? I stayed hidden, watching him. He finished his chant, then, slowly, carefully, began to clean a small, ornate dagger. Its blade glinted in the dappled sunlight. He seemed calm, resigned, as if waiting. Then, a rustle in the undergrowth. A changed jaguar, its milky eyes fixed on the man, stalked into the clearing. The man didn't move. He didn't scream. He simply looked at the approaching beast, a look of profound sorrow on his face. He gripped the dagger, held it to his chest.
"May my spirit find peace," he whispered, in a language I recognized as a local dialect. "May the ancients protect what remains." The jaguar lunged. Just before its jaws clamped down, the man plunged the dagger into his own heart. He collapsed, blood pooling around him. The jaguar stopped, confused for a moment by the sudden lack of resistance. It sniffed the air, then let out a frustrated roar, tearing at the man's lifeless body. My breath caught in my throat. He chose death over turning. He chose to deny the monster its victory. What courage! What despair! It was a harrowing lesson. In this world, the only way to truly defeat the infection was to not be a part of it. The memory of the dead man by the lean-to flashed in my mind. Had he also chosen this fate? I backed away, leaving the man to his grim end, his sacrifice a stark reminder of the stakes. The map's sanctuary was probably a place like this, a place where people made their peace before the inevitable. It was not a place of refuge from the infection, but a refuge from the process of infection. My hope, once again, was tempered by the crushing weight of reality. There was no cure, there was no escape, only survival, minute by agonizing minute. I continued my journey, my resolve hardened. Elysium, that was the last hope. A man-made sanctuary, not a spiritual one. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the exhaustion, the pain. I needed to move faster. The jungle felt like a ticking clock, every passing day bringing me closer to my own breaking point. The second week brought new dangers. The changed animals were becoming more brazen, venturing further from their traditional territories, drawn by the scent of anything living. I encountered a troop of spider monkeys, their long, graceful limbs now used for clumsy, aggressive swings through the canopy, their howls replaced by guttural screeches. They were harder to avoid, their numbers greater, their reach longer. I was forced to use one of my precious lethal rounds on a particularly persistent alpha, dropping it from a branch before it could reach me. The sound of the shot echoed for miles, a terrible, lonely punctuation in the vast silence. The fear of discovery became a constant companion. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the wind could mean detection. I developed a sixth sense for their presence, a low hum of anxiety that never truly left me. My internal monologue became a constant stream of assessment, planning, and self-coaching. Stay quiet, move slow, observe, analyze. My scientific training, once applied to understanding life, was now repurposed for avoiding death. Food was a critical issue. My dried fruits were gone. I began to forage, relying on my knowledge of edible plants and insects, a skill I'd picked up from local guides over the years. It was meager, unappetizing, but it sustained me. The taste of raw grubs and bitter leaves became the taste of survival. I had to supplement my diet. I set up snares, rudimentary traps, hoping to catch a small bird or rodent. But the normal animals were scarce, driven away or consumed by their changed counterparts. One evening, I found myself near a small, abandoned hunting camp. Crude shelters, a rusted machete left behind, the embers of a long-dead fire. It was eerily silent, save for the buzz of flies. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just an abrupt, inexplicable abandonment. What had made them leave so suddenly? As I cautiously searched the camp for anything useful, a low growl vibrated through the ground. Not animal, human. My blood ran cold. I froze, my hand on the hilt of my machete. The air was thick with that chemical, rotten smell. I could hear shuffling, uneven footsteps, slowly encircling the camp. I was surrounded. I pressed myself against the inside of a lean-to, trying to make myself invisible. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. Changed humans. Their moans were a low, constant drone, a terrifying lullaby of death. They were searching, they were hunting. I could hear them moving closer, their shuffling footsteps sending tremors through the earth. One of them, a large man, his clothes torn and stained, stumbled into the lean-to directly opposite mine. He stopped, his milky eyes staring blankly at the ground. Then, slowly, his head began to turn. My heart was a frantic drum in my chest. He was going to see me. He was going to know I was here. I gripped my machete, my knuckles white. This was it, hand to hand with a changed human, something I had hoped to avoid at all costs. Just as his head fully turned toward my position, a sudden, piercing shriek ripped through the jungle. A wild cry, inhuman, yet distinctly animal.
It was a sound of pure terror, followed by a series of crashing impacts. The changed humans froze. Their heads snapped toward the sound, their moans intensifying. The large man in front of me, now distracted, stumbled out of the lean-to, joining the others as they shuffled toward the source of the noise. My chance. I didn't hesitate. I slipped out of the lean-to, moving with the stealth of a jungle cat, melting into the shadows. I circled the perimeter of the camp, avoiding the attention of the now distracted changed. As I moved, I heard more shrieks, more crashes. A new predator had entered the game. I reached the edge of the camp, taking one last look. The changed humans were now tearing at something in the dense foliage, their moans a frenzied chorus of hunger. It was another changed animal, a puma perhaps, caught off guard. In this world, even the predators became prey, turning on each other in a grotesque cycle of consumption. When jungle animals changed, they didn't just target humanity, they targeted everything. I pushed on, leaving the camp and its horrors behind. The close call had rattled me, but it had also taught me another vital lesson. Distraction was a weapon. Noise, conflict, anything that could draw their mindless attention away from me. The terrain slowly began to change. The ground became rockier, the forest thinner. The air grew cooler, signaling a rise in elevation. I was nearing the foothills of the Andes. Elysium, the thought spurred me onward. My remaining lethal rounds were still in the rifle. I couldn't afford to waste them. Every bullet was precious, a final line of defense against an impossible enemy. Days turned into a grueling, relentless climb. The jungle gave way to cloud forest, a misty, haunting landscape of moss-draped trees and sudden, dizzying drops. The air was thin, cold, stinging my lungs. The sounds of the changed grew rarer here, but they were still present, a chilling reminder that no place was truly safe. I encountered a lone changed condor, its massive wings struggling to maintain flight, its head lolling unnaturally. It crashed into a tree, then tried to claw its way up the trunk, its talons tearing at the bark. The sight was deeply disturbing. Even the birds of prey, the lords of the sky, had fallen. My satellite phone, now just a dead weight, remained in my pack. No signal here, no hope of external communication. I was truly alone, relying only on my instincts, my training, and a tattered map to a place that might not even exist anymore. The map provided by the emergency call was vague. High ground, the Andes, contingency bunker, deep in the mountains, code name Elysium. It was a needle in a haystack, a promise whispered by dying voices. I started looking for signs, anything man-made. An old trail, a survey marker, a forgotten road. After days of fruitless searching, cold, hungry, and on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion, I found it. A faint track, almost completely overgrown, leading uphill. It wasn't natural, it was a path. My heart throbbed with a renewed sense of purpose. This had to be it. I followed the track, my pace slow, deliberate, every step a painful effort. The air grew colder still, and the mist thickened, reducing visibility to a few feet. It felt like walking through a dream. The path led to a sheer rock face, almost imperceptible in the fog. And there, carved into the stone, a symbol. A stylized A enclosed in a circle, the emblem of my research organization. Alpha. Elysium. A wave of overwhelming relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees.
I had found it. Against all odds, I had made it this far. But the entrance. It was a massive, reinforced steel door, sealed shut. No visible handle, no keypad, just a flat, impenetrable surface, cold and unforgiving. My hope, so recently rekindled, began to flicker. Was it sealed forever? Was I too late? I ran my hands over the cold metal, searching for any mechanism, any crack, any sign of life. Nothing, just smooth, unyielding steel. My desperation grew. I pounded on the door, yelling, my voice hoarse from days of silence. "Hello? Is anyone in there? Dr. Thorne? I'm a survivor." Only the echo of my own voice returned, swallowed by the mist and the vast indifference of the mountains. I slumped against the door, defeated. All that effort, all that struggle, all that terror, for this, a sealed tomb. My eyes, however, caught a faint discoloration on the rock face beside the door, a barely perceptible difference in the moss and lichen. I brushed it away. A faint outline, a keypad, almost completely hidden by years of growth. With shaking fingers, I wiped away the grime. The numbers 09 were visible, worn but still legible, and above it, a small recessed scanner, a retina scanner perhaps, or a handprint. I remembered the emergency call. Code name, Elysium. Code. There had to be a code. I tried the obvious. 000? No. 1234? No. My own birth year? My research ID? Nothing. Each attempt was met with a silent, unresponsive keypad. The chill of the mountain air began to seep into my bones, a deeper cold than mere temperature. I slumped against the door again, despair gnawing at me. What was the code? What could it be? The woman from Delta 2 had given me no specifics, only the name. When jungle animals changed, humanity's last hope felt equally lost. My eyes scanned the rock face again, searching for any other clue. And then I saw it, faintly etched into the stone, almost worn away by time and weather. 3 letters. Underneath the symbol of my organization, ARS, Aris, my own initials. Was it a coincidence or a personal touch left by someone who knew me, knew my research, knew my passion for the jungle, for the living world? I typed it in, numerically, 2719. My hand trembled as I pressed enter. A soft click, a low hum. The reinforced door slowly, silently began to retract, sliding inward into the rock face. A rush of stale, cool air wafted out, and light, artificial, fluorescent light, bathing a long, sterile corridor. I stepped inside, my heart pounding with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The air was cool, dry, a stark contrast to the humid jungle. The smell of disinfectant and recycled air. A small guard station, unmanned, its monitors displaying static. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the silent hall. "Is anyone here?" No answer, only the hum of distant machinery. The bunker was operational, but was it inhabited? I moved cautiously down the corridor, my rifle held ready. The walls were lined with doors, each marked with a different function: medical, laboratory, habitation. It was a fully functional facility, designed for long-term survival. I reached a central command center, a large room filled with screens, computers, and blinking lights. And in the center, a single figure, slumped over a console. A man. His uniform, emblazoned with a military insignia, was crisp, clean. His skin was pale. His eyes were closed. My heart leaped, then sank. Was he dead? Had I found a ghost town? I approached cautiously. "Hello?" I whispered. "Sir?" His head lifted slowly. His eyes opened. They were clear, human, but filled with an unimaginable weariness. He looked at me, his gaze full of surprise, then a flicker of recognition. "Dr. Thorne," he rasped, his voice weak. You made it. I didn't think anyone else would." He was alive, a survivor. My relief was immense, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. "Thank God," I choked out. "I thought I was the only one left. What happened? Where is everyone?" He pointed to a large monitor displaying a global map. Red dots covered every continent, every major city. "The world is gone, Doctor. Civilization crumbled rapidly. We managed to activate Elysium, but most of the personnel didn't make it to the rendezvous points. The infection, it was too fast, especially in the urban centers, but also in the wild." He looked at me, a deep sadness in his eyes. "When jungle animals changed, we lost the first line of defense. The ecosystem turned against us." "How many are here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked around the empty command center. "Just me. I'm Commander Elias Vance. I've been maintaining the systems, running diagnostics, hoping someone show up." He looked at me, a thin, tired smile on his face. Looks like my hope wasn't entirely misplaced. Just two of us, two fragile remnants of a lost world, alone in a bunker deep within the Andes. It wasn't the bustling sanctuary I had imagined, but it was shelter. It was safety, for now. "What do we do now?" I asked, looking at the silent screens, the red dots covering the globe. Commander Vance pushed himself up, his movements stiff, labored. "Now, Dr. Thorne, we survive. We analyze, we monitor, and we try to figure out if there's any hope left for the outside world." He walked over to a bank of screens, turning them on. Satellite imagery flickered to life. The Amazon, a vast green expanse, still beautiful, but now terrifying. The cities, smoldering ruins. "The greatest challenge," he said, his voice grave, "is not just fighting the infection, but fighting the despair. The knowledge that when jungle animals changed, they signaled the end. The final brutal reality that civilization crumbled rapidly because even nature, our oldest ally, turned against us." He looked at me, his gaze steady. "Welcome to Elysium, Dr. Thorne. Welcome to the last bastion." I looked at the screens, at the ruined world outside, then at the vast, sterile expanse of the bunker. It was an escape, a temporary reprieve. But was it an end, or just another beginning? The hum of the bunker systems was a constant reminder of our isolation, our fragile existence. Outside, beyond the massive steel door, the world was still turning, still dying, transformed into an engine of relentless hunger. The jungle waited, teeming with its new, terrifying inhabitants. The question lingered, unspoken, between us. How long until even Elysium ran out of time? How long until the last vestiges of humanity were extinguished? The silence of the bunker pressed in, heavy with the weight of that question. I felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a flicker of resolve. I had survived the impossible. I had found a way. And as long as there was life, there was always a reason to fight. Even if it was just two of us against an entire world gone mad. Commander Vance gestured to a small cot in the corner. "You should rest, Doctor. We have a lot to talk about in the morning. A lot of data to analyze." I nodded, my body aching for sleep. As I lay down, the image of Elena flashed in my mind. Her bright smile, her enthusiasm for the Capuchins, all gone. A tear traced a path down my temple, a silent tribute to all that was lost. But as my eyes drifted shut, another image surfaced. The stylized A enclosed in a circle. My organization's emblem, Alpha, the beginning. And next to it, the three letters, ARS. My name, Eris. It wasn't just a code, it was a message. A personal touch from whoever had designed this place. A hope that someone like me, someone who understood the intricate balance of the natural world, would find it. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of milky eyes or snapping jaws. I dreamt of a world that once was, and a world that could be if we were brave enough to reclaim it. But first, we had to survive. And the jungle, outside our impenetrable walls, still held its breath, waiting.